Hello and welcome to Thursday, May 14th edition of Words from Pastor Larry. Jump right into it so I don't take a lot of time. We'll talk more specifics tomorrow. I will introduce what's called spiritual disciplines today and just kind of a little review. And I want to read a verse of scripture as well. Here's what we're talking about. First question is, can you be a believer without a disciple? And I believe that's a misnomer. Because it's kind of like asking, can you be married and be single? No. By definition, when you are married, as long as both partners are alive, you are married to that partner. You cannot be married and single at the same time. Well, can I be married with good intentions but never show up? Maybe in name only. But is it a marriage? That's for you to decide. So when we're talking about our Christian experience, being saved by grace through faith, the redemption of God through the Son of Man, what does that entail? Does it entail just saying the sinner's prayer, walking the aisle, getting on a church roll somewhere? Is that all that it is? No, it can't be. Because I like what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said many years ago, the great martyr during World War II, who said that grace is free, but it is not cheap. And the moment you cheapen grace, you disregard its effects and its demands. Because grace has a demand upon our life. We should come to God recognizing the depth of our own sin. That where there is no way that we can, on our own, through our own actions, save ourselves. It will not happen. And so we come and say, God, you do the work, you save me. And because of God's gracious act through Jesus Christ, He saves us, gives us eternal life, and the result should be that we want to give our lives to Him. That's what we should do. If it's missing, something's wrong. Now, truth is, when it comes to discipleship, becoming a disciple, a follower of Jesus Christ, I think we have a lot of misunderstanding here. Is a disciple someone who just memorizes things and spits them out and does all the legalistic things? No, it's not it. Not at all. It's something far deeper than that. Is a disciple someone who just says, I know I'm saved and that's it? I don't need to do anything with my life because I know God's given me grace and so I'm saved and that's the end of it? And no. I don't think so. I think should be something much deeper than that. Now, we're not talking about saving yourself. Please do not misunderstand me. But I do think why we struggle with it is that we're struggling with our very own nature. You see, my nature says, even though I know better, my nature says, you can handle it. You're okay. You don't need to pray today. You don't need to consider who God is. Now, you can love Him, but you don't need to get crazy about it, okay? And so you give up this day, and then give up this week, and then give a month or two or a year, and pretty soon you're nowhere to be found. It happens to us, doesn't it? Hey, it's part of our human nature that we struggle with. Let me give you a real simple, easy explanation of human nature. I exercise 5 days a week. I know what I'm doing. I'm on an elliptical or I'm jogging. I do calisthenics and cardio, about an hour to an hour and a half of exercise 5 days a week in the morning. But when the morning comes around, my old nature says, you could miss today, and it really is not going to hurt anything. It's really not going to be that bad. You're tired? Come on. You deserve some extra time in bed this morning. Come on. it's okay. You know what I'm talking about, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. The human nature, even though we know this is for my good. You've had heart problems. This is to keep you alive. You know that. You understand that. You could even, if someone came up and said, is exercising beneficial for your health? And you would say, yes. And here are the reasons why. But I'm not getting out of bed today. You see, we can separate those things. And I think that's what happens to most of us. With our expression of belief, a real belief, and yet then we fall away because of the nature that we have that says it's not that big of a deal. Or if you do it this way, you'll really be something. You see, it's a both and. There's a pride issue and there's a selfish issue that says I don't want to do anything today. So interesting. So difficult. If you don't believe me, read Romans chapter 7. And that's where Paul says, the things that I want to do, I don't do. The things that I do, I don't want to do. It's a struggle. I like what one author said, that before Christ came, we were in a fight that we could not win. There's no way that we get out of it. But when we give our lives to Christ, we're in a fight that we cannot lose. But now, did you notice something is similar in both of those instances? We are in a what? A fight, right? Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean, all right, I lay down all my arms and I'm good to go. Remember, Christianity is not making you better. It is you laying down your arms and in total surrender. But guess what happens? In a few weeks, a few months, we pick up our arms and we're ready to go again on our own. That's why Jesus said, you must crucify yourself. How often? Do you recall? Daily. I have to surrender myself daily. What does Paul say in Romans 12:1? I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your body a living sacrifice. Every day, a living sacrifice. Why? Because the moment that we go back on that sacrificial, crucified kind of life, we begin to take up our arms and protect ourselves, handle ourselves, go on our own way. Now, here's what I think is at the crux of this. How do we grow as disciples? It's twofold. The Spirit of God, we talked about that a little bit yesterday. The Spirit of God comes to live in your life. He takes up residence in your life, and he begins to change you at the heart root level. Begins to change you so that you begin to experience change from the inside out. There's twofold, though. Spirit, and the other one is your faith. Your faith. And guess what? Faith must be exercised in order to grow. Why? Because faith is not just believing in so many things. Faith at its root level is complete trust, utter abandonment to God and who he is. Trusting in him. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. There goes my mail again. This makes this funny sounds. Turn it off. There it goes. So how do you learn to trust somebody? You just come up and say, I will trust you. Try that with a stranger. And they're going to say, trust me for what? Well, I'm going to trust that you're going to treat me good. How do you know that? Well, I just do. No, you don't. You know how you trust someone? You learn to trust them. And so at the very beginning of our Christian experience, we say to God, I don't trust myself. I don't trust culture around me. I don't trust in my wealth. I don't trust in my abilities. All of those are empty, vain. They're nothing. And I am going to trust in you. And God says, that's a smart thing to do. Come into my family. But the first problem that comes along in our lives, guess what we do? God, where did you go? God, what happened to you? God, I just don't know what's happening in my life. Your first opportunity to trust in Him will probably not go very well. Why? Because you're a newbie. You're a rookie. You've got to learn who God is, what He does. You've got to learn to appreciate His will and desire. You've got to abandon every day, surrender yourself. You've got to learn to trust Him. Guess what? It doesn't come naturally. Why? Because I naturally trust in me. That's where I am. That's what happened to Adam. I'm going to trust in me. I'm going to eat this fruit. I'm going to be okay. Bad idea. Today, I'm going to trust in you, God, and then in a few weeks, the next problem comes in my life. I got to handle this thing. We don't pray, we don't seek, we don't find, we don't discover, we don't lean, we do nothing. And the result is, our trust begins to shrink. You see, our dependence begins to atrophy. Do that enough and long enough, and you will find yourself walking your own path, apart from God, and you don't know what to think of Him anymore. See, faith is an experience. You don't learn it in a book. You don't learn it all in one experience, all in one time. It is something you're going to go and grapple with over and over. But now here is the problem. If you don't make an effort to know who God is in multiple ways, and I'll mention them in a few minutes, when those struggles come, or when good things happen to you, you will quickly forget all about Him. You will. Why? Because it's your nature. It's your nature. Can we be a very strong rule follower? Can we do everything that we know to do right and do it right? Does that make us a disciple? I wish I could tell you yes, but no. I don't think so. You know how I know that? Well, let me just read you a verse in Galatians. If you got your Bible, you don't have to turn there, but Galatians 4:19, you can look at it later. But if you remember, Galatians, the whole letter of Galatians was to a church that had been started by Paul, who had gloriously given their lives to Jesus Christ. They were Gentiles. He left them in great shape, and when they left, there was a group of Judaizers, law followers, who came in behind Paul and basically said, Paul's a good guy, but he only gave you part of the gospel. Let me give you all the gospel, the full gospel. And the full gospel means you trust in Jesus Christ, but then you have to do all of the things that it says in the law. You've got to eat certain meats. You've got to dress a certain way. You've got to observe certain special days. On and on and on it goes. You've got to be like us. And guess what the Galatians did? They began to trust in the word and the words of the Judaizers and began to become extremely legal in their relationship. So much so that over a period of time, they became very prideful. They became very mindful of other people that didn't agree with them. And they said, look, we keep the law. Therefore, we are a disciple of Jesus Christ. Really? No. You're just a rule follower. Nothing has changed in your attitude. You've just exchanged one thing for another thing. You've exchanged your Gentile lawlessness to a Jewish legalistic. But nothing's happened. You have forgotten Christ. In fact, here's what Paul says. It's in chapter 4. He's getting towards the end of his talk with them. And he tells them the turmoil he's experiencing, knowing that they have turned their back upon grace and faith and trust and dependence upon God, and are now depending upon, I've got to keep the law so I can make God happy with me, so I can be acceptable before God. So people will say, you are such a disciple. He says this, my children, I am again suffering labor pains. He's like a mother. He's experiencing those intense pains of labor. He says, why? For you, here it is, until Christ is formed in you. Wow. You see what he's saying? Is that the end result is not that you become legalistic rule followers, become prideful and depend upon your own ability, or you get so depressed because you blew it. You see, legalistic, you're going to be great one day, down the next. And then I'm going to make another attempt at doing the right thing, and you do it for a while, and you tell everybody when you're on a diet, you're going to eat that? Are you serious? That looks terrible. Do you know what's doing to your body? That's what a legalist does. You're going to be so up in the stratosphere one day and down in the dumps the next. That's not it. Why? Because Christ is not formed in you. Legalistic rule following has been formed in you. See, when you become like Christ, you become like Christ. Now, how do I know what Christ is like? Aha! That brings us to what we must do. What I want to talk tomorrow briefly are some of what's called spiritual disciplines. So what can we do? What can we do? Spirit and increasing trust are the two main components of a disciple. I can't do anything more for the Spirit. Now, I can dampen the Spirit. That is true. I can put out His influence. That is true. I can do it through pride, or I can do it through sin. Both of them pride. I can do it through a legalistic prideship, or I can do it through a sinful disregarding of what He says. Both of them wrong. But we do have an obligation. I want to tell you, as going back to that, coming up to somebody who says, I'm going to trust you. You say, don't trust me until you see how I behave. Till you see how I relate with you. Till you see if I am at the least bit trustworthy. Right? Sure. Absolutely. We told our children, when they were growing up, we're going to trust you. We're going to give you responsibilities. We're going to let you go and do these things. And we'll trust you until you prove that I can't trust you. Then you got to start all over again. And see, the thing is with God, we know He's trustworthy, but we don't put our trust in Him. How do we know that? Because we're too discouraged about how life is, and life's horrible, it's terrible, and we're in this pandemic, and where's God, and we don't know about God. So what do we need to do? Well, there are a bunch of things. I could give you some books to read. One of the best ones is a John Ortberg book called The You. I don't have it in front of me. The You always wanted to become. Something like that. I'll get the title for you tomorrow. But they're spiritual disciplines. If you read them, they're just marvelous the way he writes. He's such a great, fun writer, but he gets into great depth as well. But here are some things. There are, over the many centuries, let me just read you the list. These are things that we can do to learn more about God, to enhance our experience with the Spirit, and to increase our trust in Him. Here are ways, real ways, that we can say, I am a living sacrifice, that I'm crucifying myself daily, taking up the cross, and putting some of these things aside so I can practice some of these things. Because like I said a couple of days ago, you're not going to become a great pianist unless you're willing to sit down and do this. Here's what most of us want to do when it comes to Christian life. That's what we're going to do, guys. We want to take it easy. Come on. I hear an amen out there. I know, because I know it within me. Unless I make an effort to do some of these things. Not all of them, but many of them, some of them. I will not increase my trust in God. I will not become the kind of disciple where I am changed from the inside out. Let me just give them to you. Meditation. We'll talk about them tomorrow. Meditation, prayer, fasting, simplicity, fellowship, journaling, chastity, stewardship, submission and obedience, study, evangelism, contemplation, confession, solitude, gratitude, self-examination, silence, and celebration. That's a big, whole, long list of spiritual practices. I'm going to talk about just 4 or 5 of them tomorrow. But here's my challenge to you today. Ask yourself the question, is Christ being formed in you? Or am I like Snoopy, just kind of sitting on my in my house and just waiting for things to happen to me, and I'll become a disciple if it happens? Listen, here's what God says. Seek me while I may be found. Here's what Jesus said. Ask, seek, and knock. Do you get that? Do you understand there's an active part on our... Does that make us a Christian? Absolutely not. Does it ensure us being a disciple? Probably not completely, because we have to do it with the right attitude. Back to Romans 12:1. Become a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable for God. That is your act of spiritual worship. And don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You know what the mind is? That's your will. That's your heart. You remember we showed that to you yesterday? The will at the center, your thought life, your physical body, and your soul. The will is informed by your thoughts. Your body puts out what your thoughts and your will do. Here's what I'm saying. To change your will, you've got to change your thoughts. To change your thoughts, you've got to look differently and intensively into the life of Jesus Christ. Well, I got to end there. I'll just keep on talking. We'll get on these tomorrow, and the significance of several of them, how you can do them, why you should do them, and maybe some of the benefits from doing them. Okay? Thanks again for listening and watching. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.